Everything I do in operations and facilities has been wrapped around a ticketing system, and that includes inventory management. I mean, it's all about, we talk about all these systems that we have in place, asset tracking, inventory, utilization, digging into that, the pitfalls of these systems and how to really get some buy-in on these. Smaller biotechs or smaller companies, they don't really have a ticketing system, or they have ticketing systems, but it's very siloed. So you have IT has a ticketing system, facilities has a ticketing system, HR has some sort of ticketing system, and then you have your lab groups have ticketing systems, and they don't all talk together, which I think is the worst thing we can do for ourselves. If you really think about IT assets, facilities assets, and lab assets, a lot of the information is pretty similar. So I think if we start asking why we're in so many different systems, or are there systems that could integrate, could talk to each other, I think we need to start digging in there.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Culbert, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's exceptional guest. She's an operations professional renowned for her ability to drive efficiency and foster strategic growth. With a proven track record in the industry, she excels in adaptability and operational excellence, bringing strong problem-solving skills to the table. Her collaborative approach not only inspires teams, but also enhances overall performance. Former Senior Director of Facilities, Operations, and EH&S at Atalanta Therapeutics, Kim Dougherty, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jay. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, thank you for investing the time with us. I'm thrilled. I can't wait to get into the conversation with you today.
Me too.
Awesome. So if you've seen the show, I think you'll know what I'm going to ask you next, and that's going to be, given all your experience, the journey you've had professionally, what's been your biggest lesson learned over that time?
Easy. A ticketing system. I've gone from not having one to having a really bad one to having a really awesome one. And I think that's really where my life ends up being is everything I do in operations and facilities has been wrapped around a ticketing system. And that includes inventory management.
Excellent. Okay. I think, and we've talked previously, and I know you're going to get into some of the details of systems and assets and whatnot. So just to kind of frame it for our listeners, we're really going to, I think fair to say we're going to dive pretty deep into this topic today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about, we talk about all these systems that we have in place, asset tracking, inventory, utilization, digging into that, the pitfalls of these systems and how to really get some buy-in on these.
So what have you found that I think, we've talked about things that were done right, things that weren't done right. And, maybe we should start there with ticketing and the whole why behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard part is you walk into an organization and some of them already have ticketing systems and you're forced to live with it. Other ones, smaller biotechs or smaller companies, they don't really have a ticketing system, or they have ticketing systems, but it's very siloed. So you have IT has a ticketing system, facilities has a ticketing system, HR has some sort of ticketing system, and then you have your lab groups have ticketing systems, and they don't all talk together, which I think is the worst thing we can do for ourselves. Especially when you have a group, let's say, for example, you have IT and then you have lab assets or facilities assets, and your expectation is you have a user somewhere that wants to open a ticket, and they'll open a ticket against the asset, but come to find out it's a computer system, right? I think the worst thing that user wants to hear is, oh, hey, sorry, you opened the ticket in the wrong system. And they're not transferable. You can't just kick the ticket over to IT. So now you have a user that's frustrated, that already spent the time, put all the information into a ticket, and you're like, hey, I'm going to close it. Just open it over there. And I just don't think that's the right approach to this, where if you really think about IT assets, facilities assets, and lab assets, a lot of the information is pretty similar. So I think if we start asking why we're in so many different systems, or are there systems that could integrate, could talk to each other, I think we need to start digging in there.
It's great advice. I heard you'd say, silos in any corporation or business usually aren't a good thing for many reasons. But so Why are there so many different ticketing systems? What's the genesis of that? How does that happen? And why does it happen?
I say this in a really good way. I mean it in a very nice way, actually, should I say, is it's selfishness in my brain, right? It's each group has a deliverable, they have an objective. So the IT department's group, their objectives and deliverables don't necessarily lead over to the operations team. So they kind of, not saying they don't care, I'm sure they want to care, but they don't really care about the lab assets, or they don't care about the facilities assets. Their goals are tied to the IT assets. And I think the same thing with facilities. And the only time you start seeing the interest is when, the facilities team goes, hey, lab group, we need to do a shutdown of the nitrogen system. What's going to be affected? Well, unless you know what systems in your lab are tied to the nitrogen, because they can tell you where the house system is tied to, but they don't know each individual asset in the lab that's tied to that. So then all of a sudden you start seeing this interest of, well, that would be a lot easier if maybe the facility system had some sort of knowledge of what systems it actually affects. One group is asking the other for information, but in reality, they could both have it.
So you talked about asking the right questions up front, and I think you just kind of touched on that. Like maybe go into that a little bit further.
So that's often when you come down to when you're shopping for a system is knowing what can and can't it do. Some of these systems are out of the box. You have no way that you can optimize. You have no way that you can customize anything. It is what it is, right? So sometimes you're making do with fields and the field might say, what color is it? But you're like, hey, that's going to be my model number, right? So we're talking real basic systems here. But then you have other systems that it's forcing you to fill in information that you might not have. So then you're making things up. So it's understanding the systems that you're shopping for, understanding what fields. Does it have a field for utilities? So all because I'm putting in an HPLC, yeah, that's great. But is there a field that says what kind of power is it? Does it tie into nitrogen system? Does it tie into CO2 or whatever? If it doesn't have that opportunity up front for you to tie it in and have the right fields, then you're not going to be able to collect all the data that you really want. And it's the same thing that when you're looking really deep, when you want to add how much did it cost? When did you buy it? Then you're going to start finding information that's going to give you can't make informed decisions if you don't have all the data. It's not just about make, model, and serial number. It's about how old is it? When did you buy it? What group owns it? And then we'll eke our way into utilization of it because now you're being asked to provide a bigger picture of each asset.
So when you have all these silos, you have all these different systems, like let's say unpacking that for a minute, because it's how do you solve for that? How do you fix it, or how do you streamline it moving forward? I think you touched on a bit of it, but
so some of it is getting that integration, finding companies that are tech savvy that can integrate with, let's say, whatever the IT system is using, whatever the IT group is using, right? Other ones, it's making sure that if you have a need for that field, that you can get it somehow. Either it's going to be customizing something somewhere, adding something in, or you already have something that provides that. A lot of the asset management systems that I've been seeing now, I think are starting to understand that. They're understanding that there's an important value to that data, but you have to be the one that asks the question. They're not going to ask it for you. So I think a lot of it is making that list of everything that's important to you. Then going back to IT and saying, hey, I know I'm talking about lab assets, but let's say you want to upgrade all the computers on the site. What's important that you're going to come to me as an asset manager and say, hey, I need all this, any type of lab asset that's tied to a computer. Okay, well, that's good for me to know up front that IT could potentially ask for that at some point, which they will, because they're going to want to upgrade systems. Same thing with facilities. Facilities one day is going to say, hey, we're going to do, we're going to shut down the switch. What do you have? Okay, then tell me, facilities, this is what I have for fields. What's important for you? What would you ever come to me? So then you're tying in the other groups. It's knowing what other groups you partner with to make that comprehensive list. Then you'll have the right data to go to the ticketing system or to look at what you have to get all the fields that you want.
Yeah, you had touched on the right partnerships with the right departments when we spoke previously too, and that goes right into the whole asset utilization and what works best. So yeah, please continue if you have more bullets on that topic. It's critical.
Yeah. I mean, even the last one was with HR. I mean, most people don't think of HR, but I'll be honest, I've lived in a system where, I find out at the time of trying to schedule an asset for something that the owner that I have in my system isn't even there anymore.
Mm.
So I haven't seen HR integration much before, but some way that the system can say, hey, this person is no longer in the database. And that goes down to your on and offboarding of new users and stuff like that. So you also have to think of that. Like when you bring new people in, when you take people out, what does that look like for the system? As far as asset utilization, so this, I haven't seen one that does everything. I haven't seen a system that does ticketing and utilization. I think that is so crucial to have either some sort of integration or something that they're tied together, because I have been asked to provide data on saying, okay, hey, I need to know, how are we using this asset? Okay, wait, I can tell you about our downtime with all the service tickets I've had. I can tell you about how old it is, how much it costs, how many times we've had this thing PM'd. But then if we're doing utilization, whether it be power monitoring or file data management or whatever, that's always in some sort of separate dashboard. So now I'm looking at my third monitor for my utilization dashboard, trying to tie that in and make a story and have some sort of like single slide that I can give to a lab group that is having to justify budgeting or asking for a new piece of equipment, right? And it'd be great to have a dashboard where you click on an asset somewhere and it tells you all of it. It tells you, yes, this is, 10% utilized or 20% utilized, at the same time of telling you, well, it's 14 years old. So that's a little quicker to get to the data that they're exactly looking for. And you just don't see that right now.
It's interesting you mentioned budgets and everything too, because wouldn't procurement see the value, or finance see the value in making this process much more streamlined? If one system or department isn't talking to another just to get a budget approved, it sounds like it's a very, very difficult path.
It is. And they do ask that. So they are asking the questions now. It's just, I don't think they realize how hard it is to get that data to them. They're like, hey, somebody put in a request for a new mass spec and they want to know by Thursday, where are we with our fleet of 47 mass specs? And it's like, whoa, that's a lot of work to get them that kind of data. And I do appreciate, I think it's the right move to push back on asset requests and capital requests without knowing where are you with the utilization of, let's say, a fleet type equipment, right? And I just think even from IT, I see where IT is coming in and they're like, hey, I went to go renew the software license and I found out we don't even have this equipment anymore. Well, it was a 3-year subscription. So we've been paying for a 3-year subscription. The last 2 years, we haven't even needed it because the equipment's not here anymore. So then again, you talk about something that you didn't even know about.
Inefficiency, waste of resources and money too.
Yep.
You talked about a previous employer and a system that you used there, whether you want to name the system or not. Maybe what worked so well with that one?
So I love the name, so I'm going to go with it. It was called, when I was at Vertex, it was called VBay. So it was a little knockoff of eBay. And I loved it because it was a system that anytime there was a lab asset that nobody needed, they could put it into this virtual eBay. And then the concept was that it would inform the whole portfolio of the labs, right? So that could be the UK facility, the San Diego facility, whatever, to say, hey, we have a centrifuge or we have a mass spec or we have an HPLC or whatever that is no longer being utilized. Is there anybody else in the company? So then that was part of the process that we were trying to build was before you can buy a new centrifuge or a new mass spec, you have to go into this catalog and say, do we have one somewhere that isn't being utilized? That here's the thing. It's not saying that you're going to get somebody's 14-year-old whatever, but there's also trade-in value to that. So you could go into this virtual catalog and say, hey, there's a centrifuge on there that nobody's using. I talked to the vendor and they said they'll give me, $10,000 in trade for that centrifuge. I'm going to take that trade. We're going to get rid of the old centrifuge and I'm going to get a new one with a discount. And I think there's such value to that is a lot of times global sites or even just, campus sites, large sites, they don't see that it's my equipment, it's chemistry's equipment, it's biology's equipment, it's each group has their own equipment. When they're done using it, either it's going to sit on a bench until they're ready to use it for the credit. They don't see the bigger picture. They don't see that this is the company's equipment. This is the company's P&L. That's where that has to come from. It's kind of breaking down those groups, even with the departmental budgets, right? If something isn't being used, I'm not saying we're going to ship a centrifuge to the UK because that's probably not cost effective, right? But at the same time, there's enough big vendors out there that would say, you know what, hey, we can take it out of your Boston site, but give you the discount in the UK or whatever.
That's a brilliant idea. Do you see that being adopted or rolled out nowhere else?
No, I haven't. I love the idea. And I mean, I went from Vertex to a biotech and they just didn't have that size, but it was always something that in the back of my head with a bigger company or as we grew, that's where I'd love to take it because I think there's such value to that, right?
Sure.
And I don't even know if it has to necessarily maintain within your company walls. I mean, this could be something I'm part of the Lab Ops Unite community. I think even within the community, you can say, hey, does anybody have any old centrifuges not using anymore? I'd love to see your traded value or whatever. I don't know. You know, that's.
I think I see a business venture in your future.
I don't know. Maybe.
Like that. That's a great idea. Wow. Anything more on the utilization or like best practices, Kim?
Yeah. So I see a lot of people when they talk about utilization, they only go toward capital equipment. That's great and fine. I've seen capital thresholds all over the place, right? I've seen, anything over $5,000 considered capital, anything over 25, anything over 50. I've seen up to the, 100,000 that is considered capital. So anything underneath isn't. And they all base utilization. Well, we don't want to spend money on utilization. So utilization has gotten a lot more cost effective. Power monitoring is an option. You can do data monitoring. There's different ways of doing utilization, but it's not one shoe fits everything. So I don't think there's anything wrong with doing power monitoring on centrifuges. People will be like, oh, that's not worth it. Well, how much are you paying per square foot in your lab? Because if I see I have 35 centrifuges, let's figure out the footprint on that and say, do we really need 35 centrifuges? Because I have somebody over here looking for space for a plate reader. It's not seeing the bigger picture in there too. It's you can make classifications of utilization and say anything under X amount, let's just do power monitoring, right? Or all centrifuges is power monitoring, all, plate readers, anything that has data files, you can do it, that way. But I don't think it should be necessarily set at certain thresholds of spend on the asset because it's really, what are you trying to get? This is back to what are you trying to get at it? What's the information you're trying to capture? Is it just utilization or are you in a small lab and you need to make space for something? How do you make that decision if you don't really know the things in the lab that are being used?
So you mentioned bigger picture quite a few times already in the conversation. So where would you see that influence or that view coming from that level? Like, how do you exercise that? Who would do that? Is it the CEO? Who is it?
Yeah. So this is back to, so I love it because this is, who do you get the buy-in, right? So the buy-in of using these systems, operations and facilities folks, I think there's probably resonates with every single person I know is we have all the responsibility, none of the authority. We physically are not the ones managing the people. So if people aren't using the ticketing systems, we're not collecting the right information on that end, right? For utilization, you need to have a conversation with people too. Utilization is not black and white. There's a lot of context to that. This mass spec might have low utilization because it's tied to a specific project. That project isn't gone. It's just not used a lot. So you can't just get rid of something because you see low. You need the conversation. You need people to be a part of that. And when they also see that where the data is coming from, because when they come to you looking for the information, then they're going to see the value in it, right? So the buy-in needs to come from senior leadership, especially when you have a CFO managing the money. They're asking procurement folk. So if they're asking for the data, they need to help pushing people to use the systems that are collecting the data.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know you and I had a few topics we wanted to jump to here. We jumped right to the buy-in. I like it. I think we should keep going on that, Kim. Like the benefits, how do you hold people accountable? How do they hold themselves accountable to the system, right? Like, how does that all work?
I think that is when you have a company, you have an organization that does believe that if somebody wants to spend money on something, they have to prove that there's a need and there's a justification. And that is back to your utilization, the data from how old is it. So being forced to give procurement, whoever the leaders are in approving that spend, that, hey, this is your one slide. And I've done this at the past company. This is your one slide. This is all the information about the asset, how old it is, how many times we've had repair calls on it, how much should we spend on it, This is the pie chart of utilization, any contextual data that needs to be put in there. And that has to go with the requisition for the asset. And if you can't provide that, then why? Why?
Right.
Why do you need something new if, okay, it's 10 years old. Something being old isn't a justification for needing to be replaced. Yes, technology being dated, I can go with that one for sure. Things process quicker nowadays, so I could say, that there's justification on that. But at the same time, just because it's old doesn't mean that we need to get rid of it. But if you're saying, well, it's broken more than it's being used, sure, there's your justification.
Sure. Yep. Anything with efficiency, or maybe that's just processing you just talked about.
Yeah, that's efficiency is tied to a lot of the high tech items. When we talk about bring up mass specs a lot. Those are super expensive, and those do date themselves. You're talking about a 7-year useful life on one of those, just because of technology. It's really, that's where we are with it. And a lot of vendors won't support them anymore either.
So if you're looking at a 7-year, and this is your world, I don't get too deep into it, right? So if it's a 7-year expected life out of this piece of equipment or this spec, then are you already planning year one? Okay, here's the depreciation or whatever it may be, my trade-in value, and then can you project out that far? Is that what you do?
Yeah, it's helpful. I mean, not everything has to go thrown out at 7 years old, but you should plan your useful life cycle. Okay. And something like a mass spec, because of technology, ballpark, that's usually the number I use. Like right now for my assets, a mass spec is 7 years in my head.
Got it.
And that's from talking to the big OEMs out there that they manufacture these. Hey, how long do you usually cover these? And a lot of them, they'll cover them even longer, but they will say, technology does update a lot quicker. Processing updates a lot quicker. So
yep. Makes sense. Everybody loves stories, right? So I want to ask you a couple of questions. What's your, let's call it nightmare story with ticketing, and then give us a good story around ticketing, because really everyone's been through both scenarios, right? So what just went so horribly wrong, and what happened? How did it happen? Why did it happen?
So I will say the utilization one around ticketing was one where we found out through utilization that something wasn't being used, and we're all in a room looking at our fleet of really expensive mass specs and going, well, why is this one so low? We don't understand it. And I'm looking in the system, my ticketing system, and I'm going, I don't know. I mean, the last repair ticket we had was about a year ago. It was PM'd. Haven't heard anything. And finally got to the user group and said, hey, so why don't use this one? Because they don't want to get rid of it. They're like, no, you can't pull that from us. But why aren't you using it then? And they're like, well, it just keeps acting up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who'd you tell? I don't have any tickets in my system that say the thing's been wonky. We had a PM on it almost a year ago. Nobody's using it because they don't like it. They don't like it because it's not reliable. It's not reliable. Nobody's opening a ticket. Well, guess what? This thing was also sitting on a $23,000 a year service contract. So we're paying $23,000 a year on an asset that nobody's using because they need it to actually be repaired. And it was crazy because just doing this little project on utilization and saying, where are we with our fleet? Where's your pulse check? That thing would have been riding on a service, because I don't know what I don't know, right? I'm not physically going and touching all 47 LCMS systems that we had, right? I'm not touching 108 HPLCs. I'm not touching, you're talking about thousands and thousands of assets. You can't expect your lab groups to physically know each and every one of them and know where they are. It's the responsibility of the users to say, hey, something happened here. We should open a ticket. And then if something is still wrong with it, they have to keep pushing the issue. You can't expect the lab team, the operations teams, to be asking those questions. So that was a lot of money.
Oh, I could just do the quick math, of course. So was it it sounds like the ticketing system was the root evil here.
Yeah, right? Nobody opened the ticket and couldn't tell you why. I mean, there was no, it's too complicated. It was just nobody got around to it. I mean, there were many easier ways to opening tickets now. Like, I love the technology around ticketing. I mean, it's super, super easy. You just take out your phone, you scan a QR code or whatever your asset tags are, and it's super fast, right? I love where the technology has gone in that world, but the people still have to do it. They still have to take the 3 seconds to open the ticket.
Right.
You know.
Well, let's talk about that, because I love what you just said. So like flip it. We went from nightmare to, okay, what's really working? And if it takes literally 3 seconds on your smartphone, like let's blow that up a little bit. What does it look like now in a good scenario?
Yeah, in a good scenario, mobile application is huge for this kind of thing. Everybody's got a phone in their pocket. Um, Asset tags are either QR codes or barcodes, something legible. Everything has an asset tag on it, and somebody should be able to scan it. It automatically populates everything you need. So the scientist doesn't have to constantly go in, or whoever in the building shouldn't have to constantly go in and say, this is what it is, this is where it is, this is who owns it, this is the make, model, serial number. They should never have to enter that thing. That's on the back end. They should just have to scan it in, maybe take a picture with their phone, write high level what it is. If it's something like they want to attach a chromatograph or whatever, they can attach the data files and they hit send and it just goes. And then the updating is as easy as whoever gets it on the engineering and tech side, they get it, they look at it, they either have to get a vendor in for it or they're doing it themselves, but it's as easy as chat. Hey, got your ticket. Just want to let you know the vendor's actually in the area. They can be here by 2:00. And it's a chat. It's like a text. It's super easy to communicate. And the scientist is like, awesome. Yeah, cool. I'll be here. Or do you need me to be here? I have to leave early. It's making it super easy where it's not a challenge for people. Everybody uses Team and Zooms now. Make it super easy for people to use and they'll use it. If you make it where they have to go to their desktop computer, by the time they get there, they're going to forget about it. And that's what happens. People forget about it. They don't open the ticket.
So when you roll out new systems, so let's take a scenario here where it's a real quick use, on your phone, the system's great. It's QR, a picture, like you said. How, like with any rollout, we've all seen how rollouts can go well and not so well. So who does the training? What works well with a rollout with a system like this, and who trains it? What works? What's challenging?
Yeah. So implementing a system is always a challenge. I try to always make it fun. I'll be honest. I've gone to these companies and said, hey, can I get some swag? I want to do, the initial launch. And this is just the initial launch. I'm giving away socks or t-shirts or whatever, just to get people excited. People love free things, no matter what it is. So that's a big one. But you have to make it easy. But every new employee that comes in, you also have to think of your onboarding, because now you're launching this to new people. Let's say you're in a huge company, right? Let's say every Friday is new hire Friday. I don't know, new hire Monday. Nobody hires anybody on a Friday. Right. How do you get new employees on board? Because you can't rely on the hiring manager to have to take that burden on. So a lot of it is making very easy trainings, a quick PowerPoint, little video, whatever, of how to use the system. And I think that's a big thing is the training, because a lot of times people are like, well, I didn't even know we had a ticketing system or whatever. Like if you have an intranet or a company website, I actually throw QR codes for the last ticketing system. I had made QR codes and it was like, hey, scan this QR code, and it just downloads the app on your phone, and made that super easy and made it as part of the onboarding packet. And then asked IT, hey, on our intranet, can you add a link to the desktop application so people automatically have it in the intranet so they can it's easy to find. You want to make it as super accessible as possible, and single sign-on. It has to be single sign-on. SSO is huge. And I asked that upfront, is the SSO capable? Because nobody wants another password and another username to remember. SSO is key.
I love that. Yes, very key. So I want to jump back to the rollout part too. That was a great walkthrough. Thank you. So you're someone who hasn't used it yet. It's who knows, whatever, 6 weeks beyond past the rollout, and now you're like, oh shoot, how do I do this? Like, how do they? Now it's something they have to do, and they forgot how to do it. So how does that person get up to speed? How does it happen?
So the last one that I implemented, I created a PowerPoint, and it was like literally six, seven slides, super quick and easy. And that PowerPoint sat in a training. We had a little training portal kind of thing, and every new hire got it. So it's in everybody's mailbox. All the existing employees got it because it was when we launched it. But that's a quick, hey, Kim, totally forgot how to use our ticketing system, where to get it, whatever. Here's your PowerPoint. It's self-serve. You need to make it self-serve because you don't want to be on the hook for training every new person walking in the door as a one-on-one.
So easily accessible and self-serve. Okay. Love it. All right, so I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions, and someone reversed this question on me recently, and I thought it was awesome. But so, and we can jump back into other things. But so, with all your experience and all this, and by the way, I like talking fast, and I'm having a little trouble keeping up with you. This is
All right.
awesome. Thank you. No, 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 it's good.
It's a thing.
It's good. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Uh, so for me, it's constantly asking the what and why, right?
Mm-hmm.
It for that's my professional one, right? So my professional one. So my personal one is asking the what and why. I know it's not related to this, but like you can relate it back. But what is the kind of what are you trying to get to be able to know why you need this and why you need certain information. For example, I was working with a coworker recently, and we were talking about sending a survey out, right? And I was like, well, why are you asking this question? Like, what are you going to get out of that? And that is kind of really where I lead a lot of what I do and how I get to certain places is what is my end game? What am I trying to pull out of here? And that leads me to the what am I going to ask? What's the line of questioning? What is the data I need to get to the
Mm-hmm.
why? And to get, I don't know, the what and why. I go back and forth with those two a lot. I'm always asking, why do I need to know this? What do I need to do with the data? Am I going to do anything with it? I don't know. I don't know if
That's
I'm being
great.
more confusing than it's worth, but
I love it.
um, yeah, a lot of what and why. And then personally, and I actually work with my son on this one, is he's a little shorty and he's 5. So he doesn't like being called little man right now.
You
He
say
gets
he's a little shorty?
He's a little shorty. Yeah. He looks 3. So
Yep.
he gets a lot of little man and oh my god, little baby. And he loses his mind when they try to give him a high chair at a restaurant. I'm
Mm,
like, he's 5. But it's really, I'm always reminding him, and it's something I remind myself, be confident.
mm,
Trust in yourself. Like, you know you're 5. You're fine.
mhm.
No, don't get offended. You're 5. Believe in yourself. Like, you can sit big or whatever with him, but that's the same thing with me is I know what I know, and I just have to have faith that I don't need to question myself. I've been there, I've done
Right.
that, and just be confident in what you know and who you are.
I love that, Kim. That's good advice. I'd argue for anybody, right? It's, just have that self-confidence, trying to prove yourself to anybody else. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Good stuff. Um, you talked about I don't know, call it a philosophy or a viewpoint. Like, say you're theoretically we're joining a new company, right? You're joining a new company. And what do you prefer? Do you prefer systems and things to be all in place? Or
Ooh.
do you prefer to have a hand in the creation of a system or, you know,
Yeah, no,
program?
great question, Jay. So I am currently unemployed. Trying to everybody's like, oh, just embrace it, live the layoff. Like, I don't think people that know me know that's not me. I'm
Mm,
actively searching. I'm a worker bee, so I'm out there. But I actually get excited. I actually look at companies when I'm doing interviews or when I'm looking at job descriptions. I want to know what systems they're using, especially if that's part of the role. If that's part of the role that
mhm,
I'm interviewing for, I want to know what I'm getting into. Because if they have a system and it's very much like, yeah, I mean, we know there's problems, but it is what it is. I'm really not that interested in that environment because I know what that can
mhm,
look like. That is horrible. Trying to live with a system that nobody's really quite happy with, but they don't really want to make changes. That just sounds like a nightmare. But I love getting in on the ground floor. I like creating what I'm going to live because if
mm.
the expectation is I have to report to somebody on something, I want to be a part of that. And I've seen multiple systems. I've seen some go really awesome. I've seen some go really wrong. And so I feel like I know enough now that I would love to be part of creating the right system. So I'm up for that challenge. I know that freaks a lot of people out, but I'm all for it. I think it's great.
It's awesome. I would agree with you. It's exciting. It's more
It is.
exciting that way. It's more dynamic, and
It is.
you're part of it, right?
And you don't always get your way, but at least you know you tried, right?
Sure.
You could just say, you know what, hey, I tried. This is the best we could get. And then
Sure.
you're like, you're true to yourself on that one. You're like, hey, you know what? All right, well, this is what we got.
Awesome. So we learned a ton from you. Like, we went through a lot of information. I don't know if we missed anything. Do you think we missed anything on the topics we discussed, Kim?
No, I mean, I think we covered most of them. I know I talk super fast. It's a thing. Um, Maybe partly nerves, partly I just get really jazzed about stuff.
No, I think you're jazzed. I think it's a good thing. You're
I do.
passionate.
I do. I get very excited about this. I just think down the road, the further we get with this, I'm seeing more systems out there. I'm seeing more companies investing in this. And I think there's a lot of potential out there, and I'm really excited about that. And all I can say is, and this is a shout out to the biotech community specifically, is get into a ticketing system as soon as you can, because ticketing is an inventory system. I've seen so many, if you're managing hundreds to thousands of assets in an Excel spreadsheet, you're missing your window here. So you really want to start making more informed decisions, and the sooner you can get into a ticketing system, the better. It's just a better way to organize. There's very cost-effective systems out there, and I think that's a lot of the smaller companies that I see, just they don't see the value in it, and I think there's a lot of justifying the value in this.
You shared a ton of good advice and knowledge, and so people listening might want to get in touch with you, Kim. How would you want them to get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah. So years and years ago, my husband and I started a consulting company. He runs it now. So it's labopsconsultingllc.com. There's a contact us. It's a quick email, little sheet. It goes right to us. But he's done projects now. We're going in, asset tagging, inventorying labs, helping create these kind of data sheets. But yeah, that's a good way. That's an easy way to contact. Other than that, I think most people can find me on LinkedIn pretty easy.
Sounds great. Kim, cannot thank you enough for investing the time that you invested. Super knowledgeable. Great advice for everybody. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. This was super fun. It's great being on.
Everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And if you learned something, if you laughed, tell someone else about the show. Kim, thanks again. And we'll see everyone next time on Facility Rockstars.
It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.